Good morning.
In unison, good morning, Your Honor.
Let's see. The witness is in his place. I'll remind you that you're still under oath. Mr. Mesereau, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
In unison, good morning.
Mr. Arvizo, on Thursday you testified about how you learned what masturbation was. Remember that?
I believe so.
Pardon me.
I believe so.
Okay, and you testified that Mr. Jackson told you what masturbation is, right?
Uh-huh.
Is that true?
Yes.
And you testified to the jury that Mr. Jackson said that if men don't masturbate, that they can get to a level where they might rape a girl. Remember that?
Uh-huh.
Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Do you remember being interviewed by the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department on a number of occasions?
Yes.
And do you remember who interviewed you?
Most likely Steve Roble or Paul Zellis.
Do you remember being asked, before we get started on the next set of questions, can you describe to us what your opinion is, what you think masturbation is? Do you remember one of the sheriffs asked you that during an interview?
I believe so.
And you knew those interviews were being recorded, right?
Yes.
Remember you said, my grandma explained it to me. She told me that the only reason is because if men don't do it, men might get to a point where they might go ahead and rape a woman. Do you remember saying that to the sheriffs?
I believe so.
Why did your story change between that interview and your testimony last Thursday?
Well, what do you mean, changed?
Well, you told the police your grandmother made that quote to you, and you came into court under oath and told the jury Mr. Jackson made that quote to you.
That didn't change, because Michael tried to explain to me first. And he was more pushing on me that men have to masturbate. Now, later when I came back from Neverland, I guess my grandmother saw that I was very confused about sexuality and things like that. And my grandmother explained to me a lot of things.
So it just so happened that after Mr. Jackson told you, if a man doesn't do it, they may get to a point where they rape a woman, your grandmother made the almost identical quote to you. Is that what you're saying?
Not really. She didn't make the same exact thing that Michael said, but I'm not exactly sure what my grandmother said. I know my grandmother explained a lot of things to me.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show you a transcript of your sheriff's interview?
Probably.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Whoops, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I spilled a little water with my notebook, so.
How about you put that over here?
Mr. Arvizo, have you had a chance to look at that page of transcript?
Yes.
Does it refresh your recollection about what you told the sheriffs about what masturbation was?
Just a moment, counsel.
It refreshes my.
Just a moment. Let's take care of one thing at a time. You may start again on that.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Arvizo, have you had a chance to look at that page of transcript of your sheriff's interview?
Uh-huh.
Does it refresh your recollection about what you told the sheriffs your grandmother said?
It refreshes. I can recall what my grandmother was telling me. She saw that I was embarrassed about things like masturbation and growing up, and my mother was telling me that it's okay to do it. And Michael was telling me that you have to do it.
Well, Mr. Arvizo, I understand your position. But when the sheriffs asked you what masturbation was, you didn't say, Mr. Jackson told me if a man doesn't do it, he may rape a woman. You said if. My grandmother told me that if a man doesn't do it, he may rape a woman, correct?
I believe so. That's what you showed me. But.
And between the time of that interview.
Excuse me, Your Honor, he was about to say something when he got cut off by counsel.
Oh, I apologize. I had no idea.
But.
Excuse me, go ahead.
But that still doesn't mean that Michael did not tell me.
But what you're telling the jury is it was sort of a coincidence that both your grandmother and Michael used almost the identical phrase about raping a woman.
Both my grandmother and Michael were trying to talk to me about pretty much the birds and the bees story.
Okay, and they pretty much said the identical thing, is that what you're telling me?
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
No.
Well, the quotes are almost identical, aren't they?
You see, Michael was trying to tell me that I have to masturbate. My grandmother was actually telling me, giving me the talk. Michael was just talking about masturbation.
But your grandmother said to you, if men don't do it, men might get to a point where they might go ahead and rape a woman, correct?
Michael also told me that.
Well, so you're saying they basically said the same thing.
My grandmother said it's okay to do it, because sometimes, some men, they can't control themselves and might do that.
But in that police interview, you never mentioned that Michael Jackson had said that to you, did you?
I'm sure in one of the other transcripts I mentioned about Michael.
Not in that interview, correct?
But I'm sure in another one I did.
Okay, I'd like to ask you just about the allegations in the J.C. Penney case, okay? We're not going to go into the evidence, just what the allegations were. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember that case?
Uh-huh.
And you and your mother Janet sued J.C. Penney, correct?
I think we did. I'm pretty sure we did.
Okay, and originally your family sued for battery, false imprisonment and infliction of emotional distress, right?
I don't know.
Okay, later on, your mother amended the complaint to add sexual assault. Do you remember that?
Not really.
Do you remember that you were asked questions about that in a sworn deposition?
I don't remember being asked about my mom being, whatever.
Do you remember being asked questions about your mother's allegations that J.C. Penney guards fondled her breasts in a parking lot?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. 403.
Sustained.
Do you remember that case at all?
A little bit. I mean, I was in the middle of my chemotherapy.
Okay, your chemotherapy was going on at the same time.
At the same time as those depositions.
Okay, and how many appointments for chemotherapy had you had at that point, if you know?
They would have it once a month, once every 3 weeks, actually. Then I had 10 rounds. And I wasn't like a regular kid that had cancer that would just go in for a few hours and get one bag of chemotherapy. I would go there for a week, in the hospital, and, in a bed, and they would give me chemotherapy.
Okay, and approximately when did the chemotherapy end?
June 2001.
Okay, do you remember last Thursday I asked you when these alleged acts of masturbation by Michael Jackson occurred? Do you remember that?
Uh-huh.
And within an approximately 20-minute period you first said a couple of days before you left with Jose Solis, right?
What do you mean?
Jesus Solis, excuse me.
Couple days before I left with Jose Solis.
Yes. You said a couple of days before you left Neverland with Jose Solis the masturbation occurred. Do you remember that?
No, I did not say that.
You didn't say that.
No, I said that it happened approximately the last 2 weeks of when we left Neverland for good.
Well, first you said a few days, and then you said a week, and then you said a couple of weeks, right?
Maybe you said that it was a few days.
Did you discuss over the weekend these facts with anybody?
No.
Did you discuss the case with anybody over the weekend?
I had a brief conversation with Mr. Snedden.
Okay, and what did you talk about?
We talked about certain things that you might ask me.
And like what?
Just things about me.
Pardon me.
Things that you might ask about me.
Like what?
Like my history.
Your history.
Uh-huh.
And what do you mean, your history?
In school maybe.
Pardon me.
In school maybe.
And what did Mr. Snedden say to you about that?
He just told me to answer honestly.
And what else did he talk to you about?
That's pretty much it right there.
How long was the discussion?
15 minutes.
Did he say anything to you about an interview he had with a witness over the weekend?
With a witness besides me?
Yes.
No.
Did he ask you anything about one of your teachers at school?
Yes. He asked me about it.
And who was that?
My teacher.
Yes.
He wasn't really my teacher. His name is Richard Gerald.
What did Mr. Snedden say to you about Mr. Gerald?
I'm going to object. It assumes facts not in evidence that I said anything.
I'll rephrase the question, Your Honor.
All right.
Did Mr. Snedden say something to you about Mr. Gerald?
Same objection.
Overruled.
Can you repeat the question?
Did Mr. Snedden say anything to you over the weekend about Mr. Gerald?
He didn't have to tell me anything. I told him everything. I told him the facts about Mr. Gerald.
Let me ask the question again. Did Mr. Snedden over the weekend say anything to you about a Mr. Gerald?
He asked me about Mr. Gerald, so it's kind of knowing, I guess.
What did he ask you about Mr. Gerald?
He asked me what do I know of Mr. Gerald.
And did you tell him?
Yes.
What did you tell him?
I told him about that I knew Mr. Gerald.
Excuse me.
I told him that I knew of Mr. Gerald.
Did you tell him anything else?
About Mr. Gerald.
Yes.
I told him about school and how Mr. Gerald was.
And what did you tell him?
About Mr. Gerald.
Yeah. What did you tell him about Mr. Gerald in school?
I told him that about a time when he was a detention teacher. And I had detention, and I was in there.
Pardon me.
I was in his detention.
Okay. What else did you tell Mr. Snedden about Mr. Gerald?
I told him that one time when I was in detention, I was sitting there, and he told us we had to do work, our homework. I didn't have a pencil. So I asked him, Mr. Gerald, may I have a pencil? And then he put me against the wall, because I asked if I could have a pencil.
Did you tell Mr. Snedden anything else about Mr. Gerald?
Uh-huh.
What else?
That sometimes in the middle of his class he would go outside and smoke a cigarette.
What else?
That he always tried to handle his classes as if he was a drill sergeant.
Okay. What else?
I told him a story about that detention.
Okay. What did you tell him?
I told him there was one time that I was in detention, same, and then when I was against the wall, I asked Mr. Gerald, why is it that I'm against the wall? I would like to do my work as you told me to do.
What else did you tell Mr. Snedden?
And then Mr. Gerald asked me, he said if I was on drugs. He said that if I was doing marijuana or doing crack or something, and he told me he was going to give me a drug test.
What else did you tell Mr. Snedden?
I told him that I was, Mr. Gerald, I'm not on drugs. And then Mr. Gerald said that he's going to call the cops, and this and that, because he was saying that I was on drugs. But he was doing it in a way that he was making fun of me.
Now, Mr. Gerald was a teacher, correct?
He was a teacher at the school.
At what school?
John Burroughs Middle School.
Did you tell Mr. Snedden anything else about Mr. Gerald?
Yes.
What else did you tell him?
Then I told Mr. Gerald that, why is it that you're going to call a police officer here who would rather be doing something more important than something as minute and dumb as this?
And anything else you told Mr. Snedden about Mr. Gerald?
And then after I told Mr. Gerald that, he realized that I was right, and he put his phone away. And then he called the campus supervision. And then he kept on going on that I was doing drugs and this and that. He said he was just saying stuff like that. And then he called campus supervision, and then they took me into the office. And then I told the teachers what happened, and they said they know how Mr. Gerald is.
Did you tell Mr. Snedden anything else when you spoke to him over the weekend?
No, we talked about a lot, we talked about a few things. I don't remember too much.
You don't remember too much?
Well, I do, and I don't remember the exact things, I mean, word for word.
Why don't you just tell us generally what you talked about?
My history, mostly.
Pardon me.
My history.
Your history.
Yes.
Please tell the jury what you told Mr. Snedden about your history.
I just told you.
Anything else come up in that discussion?
Yeah.
What else?
Are you trying to specify something?
No. I'm just simply asking you to tell the jury what you told Mr. Snedden when you spoke to him over the weekend about your testimony in this case.
Please be specific.
Well, I'm just asking you. I wasn't in the conversation. What else do you remember? Please tell the jury anything else that was discussed.
Talked about my father.
Did you talk about a Mr. Alpert?
Oh, yes, we did.
Did I just jog your memory a little bit about that?
Yes.
Did Mr. Snedden tell you he had been in an interview with a Mr. Alpert on Saturday?
Yes. Well, I don't know no, he said if Mr. the Dean, Alpert, interviewed me or talked to me.
And did he ask you questions about any discussions you ever had with Dean Alpert at John Burroughs School?
Yeah, he asked some questions about it.
In fact, Mr. Arvizo, he asked you whether you had been interviewed by Dean Alpert and whether you had confessed to him that Mr. Jackson never did anything to you of a sexual nature, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't you say that at the beginning?
I told Mr. Alpert that he didn't do anything to me.
You told Dean Alpert that twice, correct?
I don't know how many times I told him.
Well, that was the reason Mr. Snedden telephoned you, wasn't it, as far as you knew?
What do you mean?
Mr. Snedden telephoned you.
Oh, telephoned.
To ask you whether you had ever confessed to Dean Alpert that Michael Jackson never did anything to you of a sexual nature, right?
I don't remember Mr. Snedden calling me and asking me that question.
You don't recall Mr. Snedden asking you any questions like that over the weekend?
Over the weekend, if Michael had done anything to me.
No, Mr. Arvizo. Let me just try and rephrase it, if I have confused you. Mr. Snedden called you over the weekend, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. That's a misstatement of his testimony and it assumes facts not in evidence that I called him.
Sustained.
Did Mr. Snedden telephone you over the weekend?
No, he did not.
Did you telephone Mr. Snedden over the weekend?
No, I did not.
Did you engage in a conversation with Mr. Snedden over the weekend?
Yes, I did.
Where did that conversation take place?
In a house.
Okay. Did Mr. Snedden come to see you?
No.
Did you go to see Mr. Snedden?
Yes.
Where did you go to see Mr. Snedden?
In a house.
In his house.
In a house.
Okay. Who was with you, if anybody?
Detective Roble, Mr. Ron, Gordon and Mr. Snedden, and I believe Mr. Mag was there.
Okay. Let me just get it straight. Mr. Roble was there from the Santa Barbara Sheriffs, right?
Yes.
Mr. Snedden was there, right?
The attorneys were there.
Prosecutors. Prosecutor Zonin was there, right?
All of the attorneys were there.
Prosecutor Auchincloss was there, right?
Auchincloss.
Yes. The fellow seated right to my left.
Oh, Gordon, yeah.
Anyone else there besides those four?
Mag.
Who?
Mag. I don't know his full name.
Okay. Is this another sheriff?
No, this is an attorney.
Another prosecutor.
He's another attorney.
So you met with 4 prosecutors and a Santa Barbara sheriff over the weekend, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object again. It assumes facts not in evidence that all of those people were present during the meeting.
I think that's what he just said.
No, he didn't.
Sustained.
Did you meet over the weekend with 3 prosecutors?
No.
Did you meet with 4 prosecutors?
No.
Did you meet with any prosecutors?
Yes.
Who were they?
1. Mr. Snedden, and Steve Roble, and Detective Steve Roble was present.
Okay. Was anyone else present?
They were there, but they were in another room.
Okay. Who was there but in another room?
Ron, Mr. Zonin, Gordon and Mag.
Okay. I'm not hearing that. Is it Meg or Mick?
Mag.
Mag. Okay. And as far as you know, Mag's a prosecutor, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Now, what day did you have this meeting?
I believe it was yesterday.
And approximately what time did the meeting take place?
6 o'clock, maybe 7 o'clock.
So that would be last evening, right?
Uh-huh.
Did you learn in advance that the meeting was going to take place?
A couple hours before.
And how did you learn the meeting was going to take place?
They told me.
Okay. Who's they?
Detective Steve Roble told me.
Okay. Did he call you on the phone?
No, he told me.
Did he call you on the phone?
He told me.
Okay.
No, did he not call me on the phone?
Did you call him on the phone?
No.
Did he show up at your house?
No, I don't live up here.
I'm just trying to ask you how you found out about the meeting. That's all I'm asking.
I told you, he told me.
Okay. Where did he tell you about the meeting?
He told me at a house.
Where you're staying, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did he come to the house?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately what time did Mr. Roble come to the house to tell you there was going to be a meeting that evening with all the prosecutors?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that question. There was no meeting with all those prosecutors. Misstatement of his testimony.
I'll rephrase it, Your Honor.
All right.
Mr. Arvizo, at approximately what time yesterday did you learn you were going to travel to another location to meet with Mr. Snedden and others?
It was around maybe 5 o'clock or something like that.
Okay, and you obviously attended the meeting, right?
Yes.
Do you know if the conversation was recorded?
I don't believe it was recorded.
Do you know if anyone was taking notes?
No, I don't think anyone was taking notes.
Okay, did anyone tell you what the purpose of the meeting was?
No.
No one explained why you were having a meeting last night?
No, they told me that Tom was going to have to talk to me about some things.
Okay, and Mr. Snedden did talk to you about some things, correct?
Yes.
And he talked to you about an interview that had been conducted on Saturday, right?
No.
Did Mr. Snedden ever tell you he had conducted an interview with a Mr. Alpert on Saturday?
No, did he not tell me that he conducted an interview?
Okay, did he ever tell you he had spoken with Mr. Alpert?
Yes.
And what did he say about that?
He asked me about Mr. Alpert.
Okay.
What I knew.
And did he ask you if you ever had a meeting with Mr. Alpert, correct?
Yes.
And you told him you did, right?
Yes.
You told him you met.
I told him that I'm pretty sure I did. Because I didn't really remember too good.
You didn't remember too good that you had told Mr. Alpert that Mr. Jackson had never touched you sexually.
Well, I believe it happened, because he was a dean of the school. And so, I'm pretty sure I had a conversation with him.
Okay, and did you tell Mr. Snedden you were pretty sure you had had a conversation with Dean Alpert at John Burroughs School?
Yes.
Did you tell Mr. Snedden approximately when you had that discussion?
No.
Did Mr. Snedden ever ask you when you had that discussion?
No.
Where did the discussion with Dean Alpert take place?
I don't remember. It was probably in his office.
Okay, and the purpose of the discussion was what, if you know?
It was probably about Michael.
Okay, you say, probably about Michael.
Uh-huh.
But you're not sure.
I'm not sure what the whole conversation was about.
Okay, but sometime in that conversation, Dean Alpert looked you in the eye and said, "Are these allegations that Mr. Jackson sexually abused you true, right?"
Uh-huh.
And you said they were not true, right?
Yeah, I told him that Michael didn't do anything to me.
Okay, Mr. Alpert asked you twice whether or not Michael Jackson had ever done anything of a sexual nature to you, correct?
I don't know if he asked me twice.
Well, the first time he asked you, you shook your head, no, right?
I don't know.
And the second time he asked you, you said to him, no, he did not touch me in any sexually inappropriate way, correct?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I'm pretty sure I told him that.
Okay.
But, I don't know how exactly it happened.
Okay, now, based on what you've already said, you also discussed a teacher named Gerald, right?
Yes.
When I started asking you questions about your discussion with Mr. Snedden, the first person you mentioned was Mr. Gerald, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Gerald was also a teacher at the school, right?
Yes.
Okay, and in summary, you had some disciplinary problems with Mr. Gerald, right?
I had a lot of disciplinary problems.
Excuse me.
I had a lot of disciplinary problems.
You had a lot of them.
Uh-huh.
What disciplinary problems did you have?
I would get into fights sometimes at school.
Pardon me.
I would get into fights sometimes at school.
Okay, you got into a lot of them, didn't you?
Not a lot. I got into a few.
Okay, and were you ever asked to leave the school?
No, I don't think so.
Were you ever asked to leave class?
Yes.
Okay, and approximately when did that happen?
Well, a lot of teachers at John Burroughs Middle School, once anyone even talks out of turn, they'll send you out of class.
Well, you got up in class and accused Teacher Gerald of having his balls in his mouth, right?
His balls in his mouth?
Yes.
No, because I was never in one of his classes.
Do you deny doing that?
I don't even remember ever doing that.
Were you in any programs after school with Teacher Gerald?
I believe he was an ROTC instructor.
Okay, so you were in ROTC at the time, right?
No, not exactly. Because I had so much experience in that field of marching, and military aspects, they liked me being an advisor there.
Well, you were accused by Mr. Gerald of being totally disruptive in that program, right?
In the ROTC program?
Yes.
I don't remember that. I remember them loving me there because their whole cadet corps was disciplined, and knew what they were doing. It was getting better at marching.
And you accused the cadet corps of being stupid, right?
I might have called a few cadets that they looked stupid with their uniforms. But, if their uniforms look ugly, that they need to make them look better. But I don't think I remember calling the whole corps stupid.
Now, you said you were accused of being on drugs, right?
Yes.
And you say that was false, right?
Yes. Will never go on drugs.
Okay, who accused you of being on drugs?
Mr. Gerald.
Okay, and did he ask you if you were on drugs?
He was doing it in a way that he was trying to make fun of me.
Were you escorted away from the other students at one point?
During the detention?
Yes.
Actually, all of the students in there were kind of cheering me on because they all knew how Mr. Gerald is, and no one's ever stood up to him before.
But you stood up to the teacher, right?
I was already standing up, so?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said.
I guess so.
You did stand up to Teacher Gerald, right?
Yes.
You confronted him, right?
Yes, after he had brought himself down to my level by doing those things. Because I believe teachers are higher than me because I'm just a student. When a teacher does something like that and makes fun of me and tries to say I'm on drugs, he's no longer the level of a teacher, he's come down to my level.
And you were angry about that, right?
I felt as if he didn't deserve respect as a teacher.
Didn't deserve respect as a teacher?
No.
Okay, so you did not respect him because you didn't think he deserved it, right?
I didn't respect him as a person.
And you told him that, didn't you?
I didn't tell him those exact words.
Pardon me.
I didn't tell him, I don't respect you. I didn't tell him in those exact words.
Okay, did Teacher Gerald do anything to discipline you, that you can recall?
He gave me detention once, I think.
Okay, and when you say, detention, what do you mean?
Detention with him again.
Excuse me.
The detention with him again.
Okay, and what was detention? What did he take you do?
He had us go in the auditorium, because there was a lot of kids. Well, first we'd be in his classroom, and usually there would be a lot of kids, so we would usually move over to the auditorium because it was bigger, and then we would do our homework in there. It was after school.
Okay, since we're on the subject of school, I'd like to just ask you some questions about your experiences at school. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Did you know a teacher named Murphy?
Mr. Murphy, yes.
You were disciplined by Mr. Murphy as well, correct?
I don't remember too much about Mr. Murphy.
Well, was Mr. Murphy one of your teachers?
He was for a while, but I asked my counselor to move me out of his class.
Why did you want to get out of Mr. Murphy's class?
I didn't like how he conducted his classroom.
What didn't you like about it?
He was just hard to understand, the way he was trying to teach.
Well, he accused you of being disruptive in his class, didn't he?
Uh-huh, yes.
Okay, were you disruptive?
Now that I look back, yes. I was
How were you disruptive in Mr. Murphy's class?
I might ask a question without raising my hand.
Excuse me.
I might ask a question without raising my hand.
Okay, your answer is, I might ask a question. Did you or did you not do that?
I'm pretty sure I did. I mean.
Well, He accused you of being incooperative and disruptive, didn't he?
He accused me of being incooperative because I didn't sign a detention he gave me because I didn't believe it was correct.
I'm sorry. You're speaking a little fast. I couldn't understand that. Could you just repeat it?
He accused me of being incooperative because of a detention he had given me and I did not want to sign it because I didn't believe it was a...
What didn't you want to sign?
The detention.
Excuse me.
The detention that he had written up.
Did you refuse to sign it?
Yes.
And what happened after you refused to sign it?
He told me, he wrote up a referral, and I believe he sent me to Dean Alpert.
Did you know a Mr. Parker at school?
Yes.
Who was Mr. Parker?
He was a new guy that came. I think he was going to take Dean Alpert's spot, and Dean Alpert was going to move up or something.
At one point you apologized to Mr. Parker, didn't you?
Yes.
What did you apologize to Mr. Parker for?
Probably apologized about the way I was in school and stuff.
And what do you mean by that?
About how I disrespected teachers sometimes.
Okay, and that was correct, wasn't it? You did disrespect your teachers sometimes, correct?
Yes.
Did you know a Mr. Collins?
I don't remember Mr. Collins.
Do you remember anyone named Collins at the school?
No.
I need you to speak up a little louder. Okay.
Okay.
How about a Mr. or Mrs. Slaugh? Slaugh.
Probably talking about Miss Slaughter.
Okay, Slaughter.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember a Miss Slaughter?
Yes.
Do you remember having problems with Miss Slaughter?
Not really. I mean.
You don't recall arguing with that teacher?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
What was that argument about?
It's because I asked to go to the restroom. And I told her that I had to go to the restroom or else I'll have problems. And then she still wouldn't let me go.
And then what happened?
I told her about how I had cancer and stuff, and she still wouldn't let me go to the restroom.
And what did you do about that?
I sat back in my seat.
You requested to be transferred out of that class, right?
Well, it's like they had all these. I didn't really request to get out of Miss Slaughter's class, but I wanted to get out of Mr. Murphy's class. They have A, B, C and D, I think. And then C was what I was in. And C is a whole block of teachers that everyone is in, and they all switch around.
Okay, well, you were accused of screaming words that the other students were jumping around like retarded people, right? Do you remember that?
I don't know.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And?
Well.
Please tell the jury.
Barely.
What happened?
I don't really remember what I said. It probably happened, because a lot of times I would stand up to the teacher. A lot of the kids would kind of congratulate me, and then.
You were kind of a hero for standing up to teachers.
Sometimes.
Okay, do you remember a teacher named Fink?
I think you're talking about Mr. Finkelstein.
Who is Mr. Finkelstein?
He was my math teacher.
You had problems in that class also, didn't you?
I think everyone in his class had a problem with him.
Let me just ask about you. Did you have problems in Mr. Finkelstein's class?
I was everyone.
Pardon me.
I was one of the everyone.
You're saying everybody had a problem.
If everyone had a problem, then I would be one of them, right?
I'm just asking about yourself. Okay, did you have problems with your conduct?
Yes.
In Mr. Finkelstein's class?
Yes.
Please tell the jury what those problems were.
Same problems with every other teacher.
And what do you mean by that?
I was kind of argumentative sometimes, and I shouldn't have been. I didn't like the way he taught because I wasn't learning anything.
And what did you do in his class that caused a disruption?
I would argue sometimes about the way he would teach, and that he wouldn't use our textbooks. And I asked him why we have these textbooks, if he didn't let us use them.
And were you disciplined at all?
Yes, sometimes he would send me out of class.
And how many times were you asked by this teacher to leave the class?
I don't know.
Was it more than 5?
I don't know.
Do you think it was 10?
I don't know.
Do you have any idea at all?
I remember him. I know I got sent more than once, but, I don't remember the exact number.
Okay, but you were accused of disrupting that class, right?
Yes.
Do you remember someone named Moon? Is there a teacher named Moon?
I remember the name, but I'm not sure which teacher it was.
Well, you were accused of singing in the classroom and disrupting the class, right?
Can you tell me more about Mr. Moon? Because I don't remember really who he is.
Let me ask you this. Were you accused of being defiant, singing in the classroom, talking, disrupting testing, and they had to call your parents?
Mr. Moon. Mr. Moon. Oh, he's my homeroom teacher. I don't know.
You don't recall any problems with that teacher?
No, because he was my homeroom teacher, and I hardly do anything in that class.
Okay, so you don't recall any problem with a teacher named Moon, right?
No.
Okay, now, how many times did you refuse to write an apology to teachers?
I don't remember being asked to write an apology.
Well, didn't you just say before you were asked to apologize at one point?
No, I have. They didn't ask me to apologize. I apologized to Mr. Parker.
But you were asked to write an apology to a child who you insulted in class, correct?
I don't remember that.
Okay, would it refresh your recollection if I just show you a note from your school records?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I can't really understand that writing.
You can't read that.
I see apology, it's kind of messed up writing.
Wait a minute. Just a moment. He's just asking you to read that and see if it refreshes your memory, not to comment on it. You just read it and see if it refreshes your memory.
I can't understand it.
You didn't read that at all.
It looks kind of like scribbles.
I'm sorry.
It's like doctor's writing.
You can't read any of it.
I can't read that. It's illegible.
Okay, do you recall an incident like that?
Writing to a student, no.
Pardon me.
Writing an apology letter to a student, I don't remember.
Do you recall being asked to write an apology to a student?
No.
Okay, do you recall being accused of not completing your school assignments and tasks?
Yeah, I wouldn't ever do my homework or anything.
You would never do it.
Okay, I did it sometimes. Like in 8th grade 1 did it for my science class, because I kind of liked it.
Now, you testified last week that Mr. Jackson didn't help you with your homework, right?
No, I said that he might have helped me for that one little bit of homework that I did, but he didn't really help me too much.
Okay, but he helped you a little bit, right?
For that one little bit of the assignment.
Okay, do you know a Mr. Davey?
Yeah, he was the vice principal. He was a cool guy.
Which school?
John Burroughs.
Okay, do you remember having discussions with Mr. Davey about your disciplinary problems?
Yes.
And please tell the jury what those discussions were all about.
I don't really remember too good. Probably the same thing I talked about like with Dean, or Mr. Parker, that to get better.
Well, you had discussions with Mr. Davey, right?
Uh-huh.
The subject of the discussions was your being disruptive, right?
Probably, yes.
Please tell the jury what you and he discussed.
I don't really remember. It was in the 8th grade. Well, it was a while ago.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you one of your school records? And this is typed up.
Oh, yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes. Now, when he shows you that, he's just going to ask you if that refreshes your memory. You're not to say what's on the page or you're
Oh, okay.
not to discuss it. There's only one issue in front of you. Go ahead.
All right. Oh, I remember Miss Super.
Have you had a chance to read that document?
Yes.
Does it refresh your recollection about problems you had with Mr. Davey?
Well, that wasn't a letter from Mr. Davey. That was a letter from...
Just a moment. He's just asked you whether or not that refreshes your recollection about problems you had with Mr. Davey. That's a yes or no answer.
No, I never had problems with Mr. Davey.
That's not the question. Listen. Did that paper refresh your recollection about any problems you have had with Mr. Davey? Yes or no?
No.
All right. Next question.
Yes, Your Honor. Did you ever have a discussion with Mr. Davey about your disciplinary problems with other teachers?
Yes.
Please tell the jury what went on in that discussion.
I don't really remember too good. I mean, he would tell me to get better, or stuff like that.
Anything else?
Pretty much that's it.
Do you know someone named Bender?
Yes, Miss Bender.
Who is Miss Bender?
She was my history teacher.
And she was your history of teacher in November of 2002, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and she complained to Mr. Davey about you having disciplinary problems in school, right?
Probably.
Do you remember that?
Not really. But, I mean, she probably did.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show you a memo from her to Mr. Davey?
I don't think so, because I would never really see those. The teachers would give them to them about me. They wouldn't, pass it to me to give to them. They wouldn't have me read it.
To your knowledge, she did complain about your behavior, true?
She probably did, because a lot of teachers did.
In her class, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you got complaints from almost every teacher at John Burroughs School, right?
Uh-huh.
And you were going to John Burroughs School in 2002, correct?
Uh-huh.
Were you there in 2001?
I had cancer in 2001.
So you weren't at John Burroughs School then?
I had finished my chemotherapy in June 2001. So I believe I started in 7th grade I'm not sure. Probably the 6th grade. I don't know. All I know is because when I got out of cancer, I think I was in the 6th grade at LeConte Middle School.
But you entered Miss Bender's class in World History and Geography in 2002, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and she complained that you were defiant on a regular basis and disrespectful to her, correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as asked and answered. He's already answered this question.
Overruled. You may answer.
Can you repeat the question?
I'll have it read back.
Thank you. Record read. Yes, I believe so.
She also said you appeared to have good acting skills, right?
I don't know if she said that.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show you her memo to Mr. Davey?
Probably not, because I never saw the memo before.
Well, do you recall her ever saying anything to the effect, you have good acting skills?
No.
Okay, when you were at John Burroughs School, what kind of grades did you get, generally speaking? Were they good?
No.
Were they poor?
Yeah.
Okay, and how long were you at John Burroughs School?
7th and 8th grade, I believe.
Okay, so that would be 2 years.
Probably. I mean, because I don't think I stood there the whole 7th and 8th grade.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I don't think, because, a few months I was at Neverland, I don't think I stood there the whole 2 years of school.
Did you discuss these disciplinary problems that you had at John Burroughs School with Mr. Sneddon last night?
Yes.
Did he ask you about all these teachers?
No.
Well, he asked you about some teachers, didn't he?
Yes.
What teachers did Mr. Sneddon ask you about last night?
He asked me, I don't think he asked me about teachers. I think I just recall Mr. Geralt. And Alpert, the dean.
Do you recall a teacher named Martinez?
Oh, yes.
Martinez was your drama teacher, correct?
Yes.
And you were accused of being disruptive in that class, weren't you?
Probably.
Now, were you taking, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Let's talk about the year 2002 when you were having these disciplinary problems in John Burroughs School, okay. Were you taking any medication then?
I was taking my 500 milligrams of amoxicillin, the antibiotics I have to take for the rest of my life, and 5 milligrams of lisinopril for my kidney.
Now, at some point you entered into an agreement to do independent study, right?
Yes.
And approximately when was that?
I'm not sure. Toward the end, probably the 2nd semester of the 8th grade.
And approximately what year would that be?
2003, I think.
Excuse me.
Maybe 2003.
Okay, you attended Roosevelt High School at one point, right?
No.
Did you ever go to Roosevelt High School?
No.
Did you ever go to City of Angels?
No.
Ever do an independent study program with City of Angels?
I don't know if it was with City of Angels, but I did an independent study program.
Okay. Again, what year was that, if you know?
Probably 2003.
Okay. And how about Bernice Carlson Hospital School? Do you recall that school?
No.
Don't recall ever being enrolled there. Alright. Before Burroughs, which school did you go to?
I think it was LeConte Middle School.
Excuse me.
LeConte Middle School.
Is it LeCompte?
LeConte.
LeConte. And where was that located?
North Hollywood. It was a magnet school.
Did you ever have any disciplinary problems at that school?
Yeah, probably.
Please tell the jury what disciplinary problems you had at that school.
Same stuff. I mean, I wasn't that good of a kid then.
Okay, and what did you do that was a problem?
Argue with teachers, stuff like that.
Did you get disciplined at that school?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did.
Please tell the jury how you were disciplined.
They would probably give me detention or something like that.
And what were you accused of doing at that school?
Being argumentative and confrontational and stuff like that.
Let me get back to your conversation with Mr. Sneddon last night. Did he ask you who Jeffrey Alpert is?
He asked me who Dean Alpert was.
And did you tell him who Jeffrey Alpert is?
I don't know if Dean Alpert was the same Jeffrey Alpert, because, I only call him Dean Alpert. So I don't know if we're talking about the same guy, because I think there's another guy named Alpert there.
Okay. Did you tell Mr. Sneddon you knew who Dean Alpert was?
Yes.
Did you tell him when you first met Dean Alpert?
Yes. Well.
What did you tell Mr. Sneddon?
Well, I didn't really tell him when I first met him, but I told him that I knew that I met him.
Okay. Did the conversation begin with a discussion about Mr. Alpert or Mr. Geralt?
I believe it was about Mr. Geralt first.
Okay. And you told Mr. Sneddon your history with Mr. Geralt, right?
I told him about that one story that I told you.
Pardon me.
I told him about that one story that I told you.
Okay. And after you finished telling Mr. Sneddon about your experiences with Mr. Geralt, did you then start talking about Mr. Alpert?
No, he asked me if I remember who Mr. Alpert was.
Okay. Now, you were sent to Mr. Alpert's office many times for disciplinary problems, correct?
Uh-huh.
Generally fights, correct?
Not really. Because I didn't want to fight in the 7th grade, well, every time I would get into a fight, I would be sent there. I got into one fight in 7th grade with an 8th grader, and I remember one fight, but I know I got into more than one in the 8th grade.
Okay, but you had a lot of meetings with him about.
Yes.
Allegations, at least, that you were a discipline problem, right?
No, I had meetings with him because I was a disciplinary problem.
Okay. And do you know approximately when Dean Alpert called you in his office to ask you if any of these allegations involving Michael Jackson were true?
I believe it was after I came back from Neverland.
Pardon me.
I'm pretty sure it was after I came back from Neverland, the 8th grade.
Okay. And he looked at you, and he said, look at me, Gavin. I can't help you unless you tell me the truth. Did any of this happen? Did anything bad happen? Remember that.
Yeah, I believe so.
And your response was, no, nothing happened, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You used to send a lot of letters and cards to Michael Jackson, correct?
Yes.
When did you begin sending letters and cards to Michael Jackson?
When I met him, I guess.
Excuse me.
When I met him.
Would that be the first trip to Neverland?
Yeah. I don't think I gave him a card the first day I met him, but, it was probably around the times that I knew him.
You also were sending cards to his assistant named Evie, right?
Yes. She was a really nice lady.
Please tell the jury who Evie is.
I think she's like the assistant to Michael or something like that.
You sent a card to her saying that you loved her, right?
Yeah. I believe I did.
Yeah. Your whole family did, right?
I think we did.
Said Evie, sweetheart, we love you, right?
I don't know if we said that, but I mean.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you a copy of a card?
Sure, yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Could I see the card for just a second?
It's.
Just a moment. He's just showing you the card, remember.
Okay.
Now he's going to ask you if it refreshes your recollection.
All right.
Have you had a chance to look at that card?
Yes.
Does it refresh your recollection about sending a card to Evie?
A little bit, because I knew we sent cards to Evie.
Okay. You called her a sweetheart and said you loved her, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that question, because counsel's not laid the foundation that he recognizes the handwriting as being his.
That's my mom's.
Just a moment.
Lack of foundation.
I'll go into it, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled. You may answer. I'll have the question. Do you want the question read back?
Yes. Record read. Yes.
And you used to write cards to Michael and call him Daddy, correct?
Yes.
And you would refer to yourself as his son, right?
Well, I called him Daddy, and then he would call me his son.
Well, you yourself wrote to him and said, to Daddy Michael, from your son Gavin, correct?
That's probably after he called me son.
Let me just ask you the question again, because you got to answer the question.
Okay.
Isn't it true that you sent a letter to Michael Jackson? You addressed it to Daddy Michael, from your son Gavin.
I mean, I don't know every letter I ever sent to him, but, I probably did.
Do you remember doing that?
Not really.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you that, the letter?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to look at that document?
Yes.
Does it refresh your recollection about sending Michael Jackson a letter that said, to Daddy Michael, from your son Gavin?
Yes.
Do you remember sending another card to Michael Jackson that said, I miss you, Daddy Michael?
I don't know, I probably did send him that.
Do you know for sure if that happened?
Not for sure, but I'm pretty sure I did.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you the card?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Have you had a chance to look at that document?
Yes.
Does it refresh your recollection about your sending a card to Michael Jackson that said, I miss you, Daddy Michael?
Yes.
Okay. How often would you send cards or letters to Michael Jackson?
I'd probably send them maybe once a month or something like that.
And you used to ask him for his phone numbers, right?
He would give me some of his phone numbers.
Pardon me.
He would give me some of his phone numbers. He gave them.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Did you tell the jury last week that he gave you phone numbers that ended up not working?
No, I told you he gave me phone numbers, and after a while they didn't work.
And you would then routinely ask him for numbers that did work, right?
Not really routinely, but, I asked him.
Okay. Do you know approximately when you began sending letters or cards to Michael Jackson?
Probably when the numbers didn't work no more, and all we had was Evie to talk to.
Do you remember sending a letter to Michael Jackson that said, I love you, Daddy Michael? And tell my little brother and little sister that I love and care about them. Thank you for everything, Daddy Michael. Thank you for being my Daddy Michael. Thank you for helping me be happy and beat cancer. Do you remember sending him a letter like that?
Not really, but I probably did.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you the card, or a copy of the card?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Oh, I remember.
Have you had a chance to look at that copy of a card?
Yes.
And does it refresh your recollection that you wrote to Michael Jackson yourself and thanked him for helping you beat cancer?
I remember that card.
Pardon me.
I remember that card.
You did write to Michael Jackson yourself and thanked him for helping you beat cancer, correct?
I wrote that in the letter, yes.
Okay. You used to also write letters to Michael Jackson's children, right, Prince and Paris?
I might have.
You called Michael, Prince and Paris your very best friend. friends in the world, right?
I don't know.
Do you recall doing that?
No.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show you a copy of that card?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I don't remember writing that.
You don't remember that?
No.
Do you remember writing any letters that were addressed to Michael, Prince, and Paris?
My writing doesn't. No.
You don't recall ever doing that?
No. My writing doesn't look that good.
Pardon me.
My writing doesn't look that good.
Okay. Now, you used to write Evie, Michael Jackson's personal assistant, and thank her for what she had done for you, correct?
Yeah. I would thank her for, like, setting up stuff and helping us.
What nice things had Evie done for you?
She would she helped me set up the AOL account with the internet.
I'm sorry. I can't.
She helped me set up the internet on the computer that Michael.
What else did she do for you?
She was just a really nice lady. I mean, we would call her and she would be really nice to me.
Do you recall ever writing to Michael Jackson about his injuring his foot?
Yes.
And tell the jury what you told Michael Jackson about that.
I just told him, like, I hope he feels better, or stuff like that.
You told him that your family was praying for him, true?
I think so.
You said you felt sorry about his foot being broken, right?
Yes.
And you said you couldn't wait till you could play at Neverland again, right?
Yes.
You called him Daddy in that letter, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Is that true?
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay. You reminded him that he keeps all of his promises, right?
Yeah, he would tell me he keeps every promise he says.
Okay. And you reminded him of that in your letter at one time, right?
Yes.
And you said, I wish I could be with you in New York and watch you record your music stuff. Remember that?
No.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you a copy of this letter?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Have you had a chance to look at that document?
Yes.
And you wanted to go to New York and be with Mr. Jackson in a recording studio, right?
I guess. I mean, yeah.
And that didn't happen, right?
No.
You never traveled with Mr. Jackson to New York.
I never traveled with Mr. Jackson.
You called him the nicest, most loving person in the world, right?
Yes.
You said, I love you, Daddy Michael, right?
Yes.
You said, thank you, Daddy Michael, for being my best friend forever and ever, right?
Yes.
Okay. You sent another card to him and it said, here's a little something to make you feel better while your leg is healing. Ha ha, ha ha. Love you, love, your son Gavin. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember doing that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you remember sending him a card asking him to, please come back, I miss you, I love you? Do you remember that?
No.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show you a copy of that card?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to look at that document?
Yes.
Does it refresh your recollection?
Not really.
Okay. You don't recall saying words to Mr. Jackson, come back, I miss you, I love you.
I mean, because I probably did, but I don't really remember sending a letter.
Okay. Now, to your knowledge, other members of your family were sending cards to Mr. Jackson as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. You sent a lot of cards that were signed, your son, Gavin, true?
Yes.
Alright. You used to refer to Michael as your best friend, right?
Yes.
You used to refer to him as cool, right? Right.
I don't know if I said cool, but I probably did.
You said you liked being in the music studio at Neverland.
Yes.
Were you ever in his music studio at Neverland?
Yes.
Were you with Michael Jackson?
Yes.
Who else was there?
I think David was there.
You said who?
David.
Your father.
No, the dude that would, like, work with all the computers and stuff. And one time when we went in there and he was doing his hair with one lady.
This is someone who works on the computers at Neverland.
Well, I don't know if he's like a computer whiz type guy. And then the other time was with the lady that was in there doing his hair or something.
How often were you in the music studio at Neverland?
Not really that often. I mean, I would go in there sometimes.
Would you go in there with Michael Jackson or would you go in there with someone else, typically?
I would usually go in there when Michael was probably already in there.
And usually what time of day would that be?
Afternoon.
Was there a general time you used to go in there?
Not really, because it was pretty random. I mean, because we would be probably bored, and then we'd ask, "Where's Michael at?" And then we would go to his studio.
And how long would you stay in the studio, typically?
An hour or two. Like, we would be in there, and it would kind of give Michael a little break from working. And once he had to go back to work, we would leave and go do something else.
Were you ever in that music studio when Michael Jackson was not present?
I think I might have been in there once.
How did you get in?
Well, the door was probably open. Because there's a code there, and you can't really get in without the code.
How did you get the code?
I said that I didn't know the code. So the door might have been open or something.
Excuse me.
It was either someone was already probably in there, or the door was open, because I didn't know that code.
But you and Star used to go into that studio without Mr. Jackson, didn't you?
No, I don't remember going there randomly.
Do you ever remember being in there with your brother Star?
I probably went in there once without Michael being there, but, I mean, it was probably just to look in there and look if Michael was there.
And my question is, you're telling the jury you probably went in there. And my question is, how did you get in, if you know?
I don't know, because I didn't know the code. So it wouldn't be punching in the code.
Okay, did you ever ask anybody for the code to the studio at Neverland?
No, I don't think so. I mean, because that was like Michael's work area, so I wouldn't even really want to be in there.
Were you ever in the theater with your brother Star when Michael Jackson was not present?
Yes.
How did you get in?
The door was usually open to the theater.
And what did you and Star do in that theater when Michael was not with you?
Watch movies.
Did you just pick the movies yourself?
No, they had this list of all the movies that would be playing in the theater, at his theater. They had like this chalkboard, and you write them there, and say that we could go watch them, that these are the movies that would be playing. And we would go and talk to the guy that works the projector and we asked him what movie to play. And we'd get our little snacks from the booth place and then we'd go sit down and watch.
And did you feel you could just go in there anytime you wanted?
Pretty much.
Okay, and did you do that?
Yeah, yes.
Did you start using that theater from the first time you ever visited Neverland?
I think we went in there the first time we visited at Neverland.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you would simply go in there and pick whatever movie you wanted, or would it just be the movie for the day?
Sometimes they would only have one movie and sometimes they would have more than one movie, and we would go in there and we would watch it.
When you were recovering from cancer, did you used to go into that theater and watch movies?
When I had cancer, I think I went in there and watched movies.
Okay, when did you learn your cancer was in remission?
June 2001.
Okay, and after you learned your cancer was in remission, when is the next time you remember speaking to Michael Jackson?
When he wanted me to go up and do the Martin Bashir thing.
Was that the first time you recall speaking to Michael Jackson after you learned your cancer was in remission?
Yes.
Okay, these cards that I just showed you, letters and cards, you started sending them shortly after you met Mr. Jackson, correct?
Well, not really, because I think I started wanting to send the cards when Michael wasn't talking to me anymore.
When he wasn't talking to you anymore?
Yeah.
And approximately when do you think he wasn't talking to you anymore?
2 months into my cancer.
Excuse me.
2 months into my chemotherapy.
Approximately when would that be?
August or September of 2000.
Okay, so August or September of 2000, you and your family started sending nice letters and cards to Michael Jackson, correct?
Yes.
And those are the letters and cards that I showed you a little while ago, right?
Yes.
And it was your understanding your mother used to send him cards and letters as well, right?
I think so.
And she used to refer to him as Daddy, didn't she?
I don't think she referred to him as Daddy.
You never heard her say that once.
Well, toward me saying that. Because, my dad had left. And I started calling him Daddy after my dad left because I didn't have a dad.
And your mother approved of that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's take our morning break.